This is by far one of my biggest concerns with the carnivore diet.
It's very important to understand, because when you say something dogmatic, and I love Anthony Chesney, he's a good friend of mine, but I think when you say something like that, now you've kind of created disordered eating.
Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the three major problems with the carnivore diet. And it's an interview that Lily Kane did with Ken Berry, who's a promoter, influencer, physician influencer, who's used low-carb keto in his practice for years. But he also promotes a carnivore diet, and he's going to talk about the potential concerns. Be sure to listen to the end where I give my final thoughts. Before we dive into today's video, I want to personally invite you to join my free diabetes lab workshop. In this essential workshop, I'll walk you through how to understand your lab results so you can take control of your health and reverse type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes for good. See the link in the description to sign up.
There are three major concerns I've seen with the carnivore diet over the years. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name's Lily. I'm a certified nutrition health coach, and I've been eating a very carnivore-ish, animal-based, meat-heavy diet for the last 4 years, and I work with clients one-on-one. I look at a lot of blood work, and I really wanted Dr. Berry's opinion on these three topics, as I feel like they're just not talked about enough. Now, that said, nothing in this video is meant to be taken as medical advice, and what I'm about to say right here should be fact-checked. I can already see the comments coming in where people are like, that's not true, in which case, please do more research, do more digging, and fact check me. But one of the concerns that I've seen pop up over the years looking at some lab work with other clients, with myself, is elevated ferritin. Now, ferritin is the storage form of iron, red meat being high in iron, and when people are eating copious amounts of red meat and iron, the iron can be stored as ferritin. Now, the reason why this matters and the reason why I think people should pay more attention to this is because, now this is where we're gonna fact check me, but I like to think of iron as rust. Like, think of iron as rusting on a bicycle. When we have rust on a bicycle, the gears are harder to turn, the bike doesn't work as great. And similarly, I believe if we have too much iron in the blood, this can result to causing more rusting, quote, quote. It could lead to more atherosclerosis, damaging arteries, cells, and even some organs.
Well, so I've had an interview with Lily. She was worried about her blood work and had different types of diets and looked at the blood work, and I tried to reassure her that she shouldn't be overly concerned about these blood tests. Now, because she's not a physician, she's may not be working one-on-one in a clinic, it's very difficult for her to give, well, impossible for her to give medical advice. That's thus the disclaimer. I have to take a little bit of issue with the concern about ferritin by itself or iron in the blood. It's there normally. And there's some debate and some people promoting the idea that you should get phlebotomy, meaning bloodletting periodically to lower the iron, you'll live longer and all. That's really not been well established, although there are some inklings or some preliminary evidence that that might be true. So here I think we're in the situation of the lab tests for those people who are not eating carbs are different than those who eat carbs. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It might be wrong, or we just don't know. So let's see what a prominent physician and clinician who uses low carb, teaches low carb diets, says about it.
Too much iron could impact the pancreas and impact the pancreas's ability to bring down insulin levels. Therefore, if there are people who are having zero sugar, they could still get diabetes from having too much iron, too much ferritin in the body. Now, I don't want people to think, oh my gosh, what? So now I can't eat red meat? Heck no, I'm not saying that whatsoever. I eat red meat every single day.
So what she's talking about is a condition called bronze diabetes. It's hemochromatosis, which is iron overload. You can actually check blood tests now to see if you have the gene for hemochromatosis or the genetic predisposition toward it. Again, for those who eat carbs, and that's an important context here for a lot of the videos that I do where I'm reacting to people who are worried about blood tests, that in the context of eating carbs, there are people who develop iron overload, especially those who have hemochromatosis. And in those conditions, if the iron is in the pancreas, like she's saying, it can infiltrate the pancreas and cause an insulin deficiency and cause diabetes. Thus the term bronze diabetes, because the iron builds up in the skin, giving a bronze or tanned color, and then someone developing diabetes from a blood test from the infiltration in the liver. Now, this is a really extreme kind of situation. I don't think it's very common at all, even when you eat carbs. But so now let's go to a condition or situation where people are not eating carbs. And what's fascinating is there are inklings, meaning no, not randomized trials, no, not clinical trials, but there are people who report, and no, it's not even published case studies. This is going to videos where people are talking about hemochromatosis and iron overload, and there are people who say that they have hemochromatosis and they actually don't get worse when they eat a carnivore type diet. If I had a magic wand to be able to study one particular area, this would be one, because it's not easy to diagnose hemochromatosis, and the ferritin itself is not a good indicator of it. So it's a little complicated, and I want you to resist the knee-jerk reaction against it that so many people tend to do.
A concern that's come up a lot with carnivore blood work, or even people who are just eating a lot of red meat, is having high ferritin levels. For my ferritin, it was right above the normal range. So I'm not super concerned with my ferritin, but my husband's was definitely out of the reference range. Like, he was pretty high.
See up here, your ferritin levels, which is your storage form of iron, were super elevated. 400 is obviously the upper range. You were at 422, but even if we're talking about optimal, usually for guys, it's below 100. And excess ferritin is going to cause higher oxidative stress in the body, which can make you more predisposed to having things like insulin resistance, cardiovascular issues, cardiovascular inflammation, and of course, liver issues, because a lot of the ferritin does get stored in the liver.
So that was an interview with a doctor who is raising concern or alarm about elevated ferritin levels. I'm not so sure. The knee-jerk reaction against the lab values that are outside the normal range for those who eat carbohydrates has been done for high cholesterol levels, and we're finding that that's not necessarily a bad thing. The ketone levels can be elevated because you're in ketosis, and that's not normal if you eat carbohydrate. So now, Dr. Berry, I know personally, and I've spoken at his conference in Tennessee, and has clinical experience with patients in the clinic. Let's see what he says.
Some people are just going to have a little bit higher ferritin than other people, given the same situation. So there is a range of normal. There's not just a normal number, number one. Number two, for many people, as their metabolism heals, they'll have ferritin fluctuations for a few months. And so my standard advice is, if your ferritin's high, talk to your doctor about it. Maybe get some additional testing for iron and other things. Maybe get tested for hemochromatosis, genetic issues, because some people have that. And then recheck your ferritin every 3 months. And for the vast majority of people, it comes back down towards normal, and it's nothing to worry about. Now, here's something that this is kind of in the doctor realm, but people need to understand, or at least be aware of this, that all of the lab normal ranges that a patient considers those set in stone. They don't know where they come from. They're not, honey. Trust me, they're not set in stone, okay? In many cases, they took 100 random people and just checked their whatever level and said, okay, here's 2 standard deviations. That's normal range. That's literally how they did it. All those people were bread eaters. They were all eating a high-carb diet. They were all probably had hyperinsulinemia, if not high blood sugar, right? So these normal ranges have been set on unhealthy people.
Yeah, so the idea that the normal range is different for those who eat carbs and those who don't eat carbs is a concept that's hard to talked to other doctors about. They do feel like the lab tests are written in stone, many of them. And the idea that ferritin itself is a disease is not true. So it's kind of like the metaphor is you can measure cholesterol in the blood, but that's not the disease. Atherosclerosis is the disease you're trying to prevent. So cholesterol is not a disease. Hyperferritinemia or high ferritin levels is not a disease, but if it gets deposited in the liver, in the pancreas, that is iron overload, and that's a disease. In my research on this, it is confusing because the ferritin level does not correlate one-to-one with a high level in the liver or the pancreas. So you really need a scan of some sort, an MRI with a special correction for it, or ultrasound to see if there is iron overload in the liver. So, if I had all the ability to study everything, this would be one of those things. High cholesterol levels are being studied in people who eat low-carb keto diets, and the results are looking very interesting and favorable, fortunately. The high ferritin levels should be similarly evaluated in people with liver scans, pancreas scans, to see if there is some sort of deposition there. So high ferritin is not a disease. As Dr. Berry says, you might want to get extra testing, and I think that's spot on.
I predict that we're going to have to do new research when we've got millions of people eating a proper human diet, because I do not ever think it's unhealthy to have a B12 level that's too high just from eating meat. I don't think it's possible to make yourself unhealthy B12 wise by eating meat. That's just not possible. Okay. It doesn't make any physiological sense. And so I think we're going to have to go back and look at the normal ranges for many of these labs when we're talking about a population of people eating a proper human diet, which is sugar-free, grain-free, vegetable oil seed, ultra-processed crap-free. You're going to have to set some new ranges. And Kim Howerton and I, we've already kind of started doing that in our book, Common Sense Labs, that we wrote. We're like, yeah, they say this is normal, but really this is kind of optimal. And so then also just giving people the tests that they actually should ask their doctor for.
Well, the interesting comment that have to have millions of people. No, we don't have to have that many people. And actually, the collection of information is being done outside a research study. If you go to ownyourlabs.com, you can actually order your own lab tests in most states, not all states, and then you can opt in to have your information be collected and used as a sample for identification of a normal range, depending on what diet that you follow. That is a company that was started by Dave Feldman. The Citizen Science Foundation and the Cholesterol Code are his websites. And I highly recommend, if you have any concern, to follow these labs and to perhaps even get it at ownyourlabs.com. The other thing that company does is it keeps the lab tests private, so other entities can't come in and peek at your lab tests. And the idea that you need millions, I don't think so. I think thousands would be good to have in a set of people going forward. Of course, then these people need to be followed to be sure that they're healthy for X number of years. What would be ideal is to have some sort of registry where people are following keto and carnivore types of diets. They have set labs periodically and they check in. This could be done on the internet with doctor checks locally. And then that correlating with a new normal range would be the evidence that's really needed to show that it's safe and that the lab tests really aren't worrisome like those who eat carbs. Those labs are worrisome for them.
It's not going to hurt you to give blood. That may, in fact, be why women on average live longer than men, because they give blood every month for decades, right? And so maybe men need to give blood too. Maybe we used to give blood during the hunt or during battle, and we don't really give blood that often anymore. Who knows? But I think there's a lot of fear mongering out there about, oh my God, you're so-and-so level. But then at the same time, there's too many people ignoring levels that after a certain point probably need to be given more attention.
Did you catch, even Dr. Berry made the subtle mistake of saying if your hemoglobin and hematocrit are above the normal range, get your blood drawn. Well, the normal range of carb eaters. So, it's confusing. If you were looking at a sodium level or potassium or chloride, these seem to be the same across all types of dietary approaches. It's when you get to the cholesterol levels, the ferrying of iron and cholesterol around, that's where the metabolism really changes, and the lab tests may not reflect normal or optimal when you look at those who eat carbs.
And so when I'm kind of throwing out these global guidelines, it's because I know that I've got people like you out there to kind of tease through this psychology and this sociology and this wiring that sometimes happened before we were even old enough to make decisions, right? When we were 3 and 4 years old, we had this thing, whatever it was, that was moving our thoughts and beliefs about food in this unhealthy direction, because a lot of this, our parents, they meant well, but they put very bad programming in our meat computer, and it leads to problems unless you've got somebody like you or our coaches teasing that out and saying, hey, let's talk about that, let's think about that.
So he says that you had some bad programs put in your meat computer. That I have to say, Dr. Berry is very focused on the carnivore approach. He calls it the proper human diet. And what we're seeing here is the nuance or the differences of treating different types of people. So I think Lily probably treats people who are not clinically as ill as those who I treat and who Dr. Berry treats. And the take-home point is, if you're not feeling well with whatever sort of dietary approach you're doing, you should see somebody who knows about it. And after reviewing lots of videos, you want to talk to someone who knows about a carnivore or a keto diet. You don't want to talk to someone who knows about the vegan diet. They'll just tell you not to do the carnivore or keto diet. Likewise, if someone comes to me and says they want to do a vegan keto, I say, well, I don't know much about how to implement the vegan keto. You can do it, and here are some resources to do it. But even the vegan promoters or vegan teachers have a whole different way of viewing food and then teaching. It's just like driving on the left-hand side of the road and the right-hand side of the road. The rules are different, and we teach it differently. Not that one is necessarily wrong. And so anyway, the different patient populations is why we're seeing differences in the approach in this video so far.
But to just say all plants are trying to kill you is dogmatic. And it's helpful to many people, because what Chafee's trying to do is dispel the magic that plants are the healthiest food. And so anytime you've got that kind of message, you got to do the diametrically opposed thing to kind of slap people and say, hey, no, a plant-based diet's not the healthiest diet for humans. That's stupid. Plants are literally putting chemicals, phytochemicals in their bodies to make you sick and uncomfortable if you eat them, which is true. But I think for people who are already susceptible to disordered eating, when you say something like that, if the wrong person hears that, that's going to cause problems down the road.
Yeah, so the idea that plants can't run away as a defense mechanism was actually sort of helpful for me to think this through in a face validity or common sense kind of way. Why would plants put toxins in their leaves? It's to discourage mammals from eating them, neurotoxins, and historically humans have used plants for medicinal purposes, not necessarily for daily consumption. And, all the absolutes here, it's not possible to say all plants are trying to kill you, and many of them have been diluted down in their toxins there. But when you think about it, what mammals would eat hot peppers and go back to eat the hot peppers over and over and over? So humans have developed a desire and predilection for things sometimes that hurt. Hot peppers basically hurt, and an animal eating that would probably be discouraged from making them and consuming them again. So we have a different type of species, the human, to deal with than the mammals that are eating plant leaves. Thus, it's also going to be difficult to convince someone who believes they need to eat vegetables and plant leaves that it's okay not to. It's okay. So we're trying to individualize this, and not everyone has to avoid plants. That's the message. Well, I think that was a great video that goes over some of the detail of what can happen when you don't eat carbohydrates and eat more of a carnivore type of diet. You might be surprised that in my book, End Your Carb Confusion, I don't say that everyone needs to do a keto or carnivore type of diet. There are actually several levels of carb consumption that I think have scientific proof behind them that they can be healthy and even reverse metabolic diseases. If you've come into the low carb or keto world through the carnivore door, you might think that that's the only thing that is available. Actually, you can eat in a way that's more flexible, like Dr. Berry said, testing things that come in. And then he mentioned the term elimination diet. What that means is that you've eliminated gluten, you've eliminated simple sugars, you've eliminated artificial dyes and preservatives. So the carnivore or keto diet actually is an elimination diet to see if those things might be causing your symptoms or even serious metabolic and medical problems. So let's keep thinking and let's keep researching and collecting data on a wide variety of dietary patterns. I think of carnivore as a subset of low-carb diets, but they don't have the scientific publications yet to make a policy for it, in my opinion. I hope that's helpful, and if you like, please like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell, and look out for new content twice a week. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.